Testing, testing. Testing, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2. All right, everyone, we're getting ready to start here. Just doing my pre-record preparation and double checking. So, here we go. Not that I haven't done this already, but whenever I'm on live, I need to look and see while I'm talking whether the sound is coming through, because I did an entire podcast the other day on Catholicism, and most specifically the Mass, which I'll redo. I will. I need to. I promise I will. How's that? Now that I've done that, now I have to redo it. But let's see here. I did the entire podcast on Catholicism. I was excited. I think it lasted an hour. This was a regular Theology Unplugged, not my daily Theology Unplugged for Through the Bible. But I got to, let's see here. I got to this slide right. What was it on? I think it was, no. It was one of these slides. I think it was the one on the Bible, and so I'd click right like this on the Bible, and you couldn't hear me. So it all of a sudden stopped, and I did long interpretations of the Bible. I mean, it was like we spent a lot of time on it, and so it was not good. No. Wait a minute. It wasn't this. It was. I don't even have it up right now, but my iPad, I can hook up my iPad and draw from my iPad, and I drew an illustration. It's a great illustration, but I can't draw it. I need to just bring up the picture of it. That's a good idea right now. I just not thought of that. But it's kind of fun to, work through while you're teaching, and if you draw it out while you're talking to people, although I'm not doing that today, and I probably could. But my problem is I'm left-handed, and I always blame it on being left-handed, and I cannot draw at all. I mean, I am the absolute worst. My handwriting's bad. It seems like my hands start shaking. I don't know. I'm just not steady. I wouldn't have made a good surgeon. And I say that at the same time as I've told you guys a lot lately that I got an art scholarship, but it's very abstract and very color coordinated, that kind of stuff, how I got the scholarship for. And I shouldn't have gotten it. I mean, I'm not good at anything with regard to art, but I can't draw. That's the moral of my story. Okay, no mess in the background, is there? If there is, just overlook it, please. Books falling over, things on the shelves that are not good. Look at this. I'll move this over, see if you guys can see the rest. There's a couple of Martin Luther things. There's St. Augustine. There's another candle. Isn't that nice? I mean, it's kind of cool. Oh, well. All right. Enough of that. Let's get started. Okay. Welcome to Theology Unplugged. I'm Michael Patton, and we are going through the 16th session in our Through Theology in a Year. So happy you guys are joining us. So happy you guys are watching this, going through it, maybe getting caught up, going through the first 15 of them, and seeing what we're doing. I mean, it's an exciting thing, what we're doing here. Don't forget to check out us at credoministries.org. That kind of shows the big picture of what we're doing. And then also my Patreon. That's one of the ways if you want to support daily, and this is the way that I get my personal support. Now, the ministry support, the bigger vision of the ministry, I say you go to credoministries.org, donate through there, and then you got the opportunity to get a tax deduction. Okay, here's one thing I want to talk about beforehand. I want to talk to the few of you, and I know there's only a few, maybe one or two, or maybe it's every one of you. Maybe you just got here and you're saying, you know what, somebody told me to come watch this. It is theology and, using big words, everything else. And I just don't think this is for me. I like the spiritual thing. I like the A.W. Tozer's and the, kind of the more devotional stuff. The deepest I'll get is C.S. Lewis type thing, which C.S. Lewis is pretty deep. But you may not ever want to get into theology. You may not see the great need for theology. And let me tell you something. I do want to say this, because sometimes people like me who teach and are excited about theology, into theology, you can think that's all there is. And sometimes it's really easy for me to think that way, because my whole world is surrounded by theology and putting arguments together and understanding every single aspect the best I can and what are the issues. And while I love that, I really do, I recognize what I'm called to do here is give you one dimension of the Christian faith. Not the whole dimension, and this isn't necessarily what your life is supposed to consist of only. Your theology provides the grounding, the foundation for your spiritual life, but some people go their entire lives and don't really have that grounding. It's unfortunate, I think, but at the same time, they're incredible with regard to ministry and service, and their faith is incredible. It just lacks the foundation, and God never pushes them through any type of trials that cause them to have to build the foundation. But at the same time, there's a lot of theologians that never really find a spirituality about them, never really find kind of that emotional bent to think the way some people do. And sometimes we look at other Christians, we don't understand the way they think, because we're so into the way we think. What we really have to do is understand how much our faith in our God, in Christ, is so multidimensional, and it will continue to be multidimensional for all eternity. One of these dimensions will always be the mind, the intellect, the engagement of the mind. We celebrate that. We celebrate it here because we got that from God. We got the desire to understand things, the desire to put things together and see all the components and how they're working together and how exciting that is. We got that from God. Every aspect of who we are, we got from God. The good stuff, as long as we're taking our emotions, taking our experience, taking our intellect, and using these and extracting the bad, because there's so much bad too in each one of these that can just absolutely wreak havoc on our life and destroy our faith. But I want you to see that there's not just one way to approach this, and there's not just one way throughout your entire life. You see, I'm a certain personality, and so are you. And I can't change my personality. My personality can develop. It can go through things. It can, God can change it. God can make it one way for a certain part of your life, and then change it some later on. That's up to Him. But we can't change our personality. But at the same time, we can learn to appreciate all the personalities that are out there and how we engage with them. I'm not as emotional as I would like to be, as far as, I don't know, certain things with regard to God. People being able to sense God and feel His presence, and the whole world of the charismatic, that's always fascinated me, and I've never been charismatic. Although when we get to that, I'll make an argument for the charismatic side of things, and it's a compelling argument, and then I'll make an argument against it as well. Anyway, I'm not charismatic. I'll be up front with you right now about that. But if you know me very long, I'm not charismatic, but I would like to be. I wish I could be. I want to be, because I envy a lot of times the way other people see the world, as I'm sitting here doing theology and creating charts and just step by step trying to learn how to not only understand it but then to teach it. I'm envious with a if I can put it this way, with a godly envy, with a godly jealousy. I don't look at you, and I there probably is one time whenever I look down upon you for being who I'm not. But now I do appreciate it, and I wish I could experience that. And hopefully God has that for me someday in my life. I never want to leave theology. I never want to get away from what I do. But at the same time, I would love to have my faith be more multidimensional. And what I'm doing for you, listen, what I'm doing for you, those of you who have come here, and this really isn't your thing. You're not really into the theology and if I could put this a right way, not sounding wrong, the intellect of it all, or intellectualism, or it looks ivory tower to you. I just want you to see, I'm providing for you. I'm trying to provide for you. Maybe God will take you through this year, and you'll just get one dimension. Maybe you'll get back to your own dimension later on, but at the same time, try to build a multi-dimensional faith. Focus on what God has brought you to, where you're at in life. I'm not saying get away from that, but at the same time, begin to open the windows and the doors in your house of spirituality and see there are other things going on, and they are great things, and they are important things. And theology is incredibly important. I mean, you can't really go wrong learning this stuff. I know it's hard, and I know it can cause confusion, and I know sometimes it's easier just to walk through the faith without seeing the arguments that are for and against your position, because it's disturbing sometimes whenever you begin to see, hey, I might be wrong about my faith when it comes to this or that. I just want you to see, I'm not trying to change you. I'm just trying to give you a view at a new dimension, and maybe God is taking you there now. Not only does God do this, and I've seen this, and I've been through this part myself, but he does this throughout our entire lives. Like you may be 30, 40 years old, and you've been kind of one way your whole life, and then all of a sudden you go through something. You go through hell, you go through a loss, you go through something that you just didn't handle very well, or it was just a very, very hard time in life, finances or marriage or kids or whatever. And then all of a sudden you begin to see things differently a tiny bit. I've seen people do this with church. Like, you go to one church your whole life, and it's the greatest church in the world, and it's the way they should do things. There's no other way to do things besides what our church does. Maybe they're doing things over there, and I'm not saying they're not Christian, but man, we've got it going on here. And then suddenly you begin to look at another church and see a dimension. You go to that church, and their worship music is so... beforehand you used to criticize it, but now you're like, man, I envy this. This is something I want. This is something I need. God does do that. You go through, so many times we do go through changes, big changes like that, and we need to expose ourselves to the way God's people, your family in Christ is working in other places. So I think it's wonderful for you to be able to go to another church. And if you could think of this as coming in a church that really focuses on theology, but I'm not saying we don't appreciate your church, but this is what we do here, and I want you to go here for a little bit. Ask your pastor if you can go here for a little bit, and get back to your church later if you want to. But this is shocking your system. People do this in working out. Whenever you exercise, one thing that you don't want to do, the reason why machine weights are worse than free weights is because machine weights limit you, and your muscles get used to a certain range of motion, the exact same range of motion, and they adjust. Your muscles are incredible. It's an incredible system, how it adjusts and how it works. But the thing is, it's like, okay, we can do this. We don't need to change anything anymore. But then whenever you have free weights, and it's more free, there's not bars connected to it. It doesn't have one range of motion. Then all of a sudden, your muscles have to adjust, and it's a shock to your system. You do something, complete a workout that you have never done before, and that's a shock to your system, and it's really, really good for you. You might get back to your regular workout, but shock your system every once in a while. Do something different. Let your muscles know that you're not gonna be satisfied with this one range of motion, and that is what I'm talking about here. I'm sorry for the devotional beforehand here, but it's important. It's important that you see this. It's important that I attempt my very best to at least convince you of the need for theology. And maybe those of you who already know this is something you can tell them. You can tell these other people and say, hey, listen, just give it a chance. Just give it a chance. Go through theology in a year. So let's get started here with that in mind. Oh, let me get those gone. That is ready. Okay. Start with the PowerPoint. Let's go back up. This is the PowerPoint that I left you with last time, as we said. Hey, listen, here's a sneak peek at what it is we're going to be going through, and I'll give you that one more time. I know after all I've said here, I throw this chart up here, and this chart is incredibly confusing for you, and you say, "Oh no." Here we go, and especially here, there's Michael with his charts. I love charts, I really do. I see things left-handed, so I do things through pictures. But anyway, this is the chart we're going to go through, and we're going to walk you step by step through it. This is called the theological process. And the theological, let me put it this way. It is called the theological process, but it's also called the exegetical process. It's also called the homiletical process, and I'll teach you what each one of those means in just a moment. But it's just basically the process of how it is we take the Bible, take the Scripture, take the things we learn, and process them into our daily lives. Last time, if you remember, we had the poor people over here, in a circle doing a Bible study and saying, what does it mean? First they asked, let's see here, what does it mean to you? So you remember, we did this last time, everybody in Bible study saying, what does it mean to you? And my big argument was, it doesn't matter what it means to you. It matters what it means. That was the important thing. And so we've got to get to a point to where we understand what it means first. And then once we figure out what it means, then we can say, how do we apply this? Okay, so that's basically what we're doing here. We're trying to figure out what the Bible meant, what the Bible means, and how does it apply. So let's go ahead and start with this. This is the basic chart. This is the bones of it. I've actually got the on PowerPoint each element of this in a folder, and I think I called this the bones. This is the bones of the chart. And if you look at this, what you've got is you've got a couple words here, author's intent and author's intent. No, that was not a typo. I do have the little a, author's intent, and then the big A, author's intent. So we've got that, keep that in mind. And then we've got, notice, time-bound audience below that line, and then timeless audience above that line. Okay, keep that in mind, because we've got three components here we're working with. What are these three components? We've got number one in the bottom left-hand corner is where the audience was, where the author was when he wrote this particular part of the Bible. So you're talking Moses, you're talking David, you're talking Paul. There's that area that they're time bound. Whenever they wrote this, they were time bound. They're always time bound, but the teaching was time bound. The teaching had a context to it. There was a reason why they wrote what they wrote, and we've got to do the best we can to understand why they wrote it, what they meant when they wrote it, what their audience heard when they read it, and how they understood it, not how we understand it. Because whenever we're reading it, we're reading a different world. Did you know the Bible? Let me tell you something. Did you know the Bible was not written to you? I know that sounds heretical, but it wasn't written to you. The Bible itself was written to people all over for 1,500 different years, across 1,500 years. 40 different authors wrote on 3 different continents over this long time period about situations they were in to an audience that they were thinking of. They weren't thinking, man, I wonder one day, 5,000 years later, somebody's going to be reading this and they're going to be getting edified from it. That is not what they were thinking. They had a specific situation that they were writing to. That was the authors and the audience knew about, but we don't. It's a mystery to us. So whenever I say it wasn't written to you, I'm saying in this original intent, you've got to understand, you've got to interpret it in such a way as this was written to somebody else. That's the first step. Get that out of your mind that whenever you're reading this, it automatically was written to you. We'll get there, but we've got to go through this process for it first. The Bible was not written to you. It was written in a context and a place by people who understood the context and the place, and we've got to recognize that, or we will not understand the Bible. And if we don't understand the Bible, goodbye good theology. Okay? So let's get back to this. You've got the author's intent. Everything that's going on in the world is going on in that first little circle. That first little square. Then you've got the top audience, and the top audience really represents a timelessness, not necessarily an audience itself that is timeless, because the people aren't timeless, but it is saying this was written, that is written in a time and a place to a people. And this one is written to showing what does it mean to everybody? What does it mean to them? But what does it mean for all time? What did it mean and what does it mean? So there is at the top a timeless audience, which basically it is saying that this is true no matter what date there is on the calendar. This is true no matter who is reading it. This is true because it is an objective, eternal truth. That's what the top part means. And I'm not saying, I haven't made an argument yet, and I'm not going to, that the Bible always has a timeless meaning. Sometimes the meaning that you're reading is very time-bound, and it only applies to that day and age. I'm getting ahead of myself, but realize that. The Bible is contextualized, and sometimes that contextualization does not translate into a timeless principle, something for us to do, something for us to believe, something for us to change. Okay, and then the last one in the bottom right, that is the time-bound audience too, but what is that? Can you guess? If the first one is the original author's audience and time, if the top one is kind of this timeless, always objective time, what is the bottom right? That is us. That is us. That is who we are. We're in the bottom right quadrant, and we're trying to get the Bible from that bottom left quadrant to the bottom right quadrant. And how do we do that? We go, let's see here. See this? This arrow points you. This map is great. It's perfect. It'll get anybody there because there's only 3 steps on the map. Even us guys, we might remember it and not need this map later on. But this is the only direction you go. You can't go any other direction. You've got to go from the bottom left quadrant to the top quadrant to the bottom right quadrant. You cannot go this way. Well, you cannot say, hey, I'm going to start with what I know today, what is already true today, what it is that I was taught by my parents, what it is that I understand from the culture, what it is that my church has taught me. I'm going to start with that, and then I'm going to make sure the timeless audience is the same, and then make sure that we read that into the Bible. You see, this is called, and you may have heard this before because it's a word that goes around a lot. This is called eisegesis. Eisegesis. You're reading into the Bible what it is that you want it to say. And if you start with your own theology, even if you started in the upper quadrant, only there, you said, well, I've got a timeless understanding, and that's it. I'm starting here. and then I'm going to force it on my day and age and on the Bible's day and age. And oftentimes we do that. We read into the Bible, we read into situations, we make everything fit with what it is. It has to fit, no matter how much we have to twist it, no matter how much we have to change it, we will make that fit into the Bible, into our book that we are reading. Paul is going to say what I need him to say. That is called eisegesis. E-I-S-E-G-E Jesus. G-E-S-I-S. Okay, I don't know. Don't slow that down and do it. I should have known better than to read from my mind or spell from my mind. I can't do that. If I'm typing, got it. If I'm writing, I can do it. But if I just do it like this, I don't do it well. I've had 51 years to learn that, and I should not have spelled that out loud. Okay, so let's get back to this. Okay, you can't go that direction, and let me tell you something. You can't go like this either to bypass the timeless principle. You can't say, hey, listen, I'm just going to start with the Bible and then directly apply what the Bible says to my life. You say, Michael, why can't you do that? Okay, well, let me give you an illustration. This is a free illustration, even though we're going to illustrate this timeless amount of times. You go into the Bible and you see that this is kind of it sounds kind of silly, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying. Whenever Paul asks Mark, or to ask Timothy to ask Mark to bring him his cloak, his coat. He was getting cold. Paul was in prison. He was getting cold. He said, hey, will you tell Mark to bring me my coat? And so Mark, I don't know, he probably did. But it's in the Bible, and the Bible says for Mark to bring Paul his cloak. How do we take this from the author, from that day and age, and directly apply it to us today? Well, I guess you're going to have to say something like this, because you're not going through the upper quadrant. If you're not going through the upper quadrant in a proper way, this way, making it go through there first, you don't have the filter. You can't figure out what it is that it is saying. So basically, you're going to start a ministry, which I guess is probably a good ministry, but that text isn't doing it, to bring people their cloaks. You bring people their cloaks. How's that? Why do we do that? Because we have as our tagline Paul's message to Timothy to tell Mark to bring him his cloak, and that's why we bring people cloaks. Well, that's what my seminary professor would say. Michael, good sermon, wrong text. In other words, there is a principle out there that says bring people or help people who are poor and cold, which may include bringing them cloaks, but you're using the wrong text, because that text is not teaching that. So if we go straight from the authors or the original author to us, then we're going to have all kinds of problems. And I know that was a silly example, but let me tell you something. We do that all the time, and I want you to recognize that you may do that. And so you need to think through. Am I just going straight from the author's day to my day without filtering it through the timeless audience? So let's go to the next one. Okay, so we start with step one. This is there's no other way to do it. You can't start with step two. You can't start with step three. You'd have to start with step one. Okay, that's not hard to realize, but I'm saying this, I'm belaboring this because you can't start anywhere else. When you're reading the Bible in your mind, you cannot start with it being this book that automatically applies to you. I know that's hard because you probably read the Bible. Sometimes you may, and it's like, man, that directly spoke to me. I don't understand how. It's just like this magic thing that happened. Well, I mean, God may be giving you some kindness, some movements into your life despite your method, but it's not because of your method. If your method is bad, eventually it will do you wrong and betray you. If you start and you read the Bible and you don't take it through this process, I promise you'll be confused. It'll be your spirituality will be broken in many places, and it may be really, really messed up to where you are defunct in your movements as a Christian. You are disillusioned in your spiritual life because you have believed God to be something that the Bible does not teach him to be. You had believed that God was going to do something that the Bible did not say he was going to do. And let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and give this illustration. It's a terrible illustration to give, especially whenever we don't have that much time. But I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I'm going to power through this. A lot of you guys have heard this illustration. This illustration is hard for me. It's very hard, and I'll probably mention this situation again because it affected my life very, very deeply. But there was a time, and let me go back here just so I'm ready with the chart here. There was a time, this was, 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago. My sister was very, very depressed. My sister named Angie, and she was just an incredible girl. Those of you who knew her, I mean, it's just, you don't understand how beautiful she was. You don't understand what a joy it was for me to have her as a sister. And especially at this time in my life, because I had just gone through seminary. She had supported me through seminary. You see, both me and her were wild together. We were partiers together. We did not live right. But whenever I stopped and went to seminary and did all I did, I'm not saying she followed me because of that, but she did change at the same time. And she supported me 100%. And we were both growing in our spirituality together. We lived in the same city in Dallas where the rest of my family lived in Oklahoma. We hung out. We went to the same church. We used to take, whenever Stonebriar Community Church first started, we were there. We were at the Collin County Community College and putting up chairs and setting them up. But there was also this prayer list that they had, and the prayer list was like 20 pages stapled together. I don't know who did that back then, but it was for the whole church, and it was basically you could take a copy of it. They were set there. We used to take that, and I say this because this was her deal. This is what she wanted to do. We used to take the prayer list and big thick deal, and we'd pull it in half. Here's your half, here's my half. And I mean, that's a special time for me with Angie because we were both moving forward together. Through a series of events at this time that happened very quickly that I don't really know how and I don't know why, but she woke up one morning incredibly depressed. Never really experienced this kind of depression before. I had no clue what she was talking about. That was back in my stage before I went through the depression, which maybe I'll talk about later. But I didn't understand it. It was one of those times where I was like, Angie, just snap out of it. As if she had that decision in front of her to snap out of the depression, but she had decided not to take it. I find that humorous now after I went through the depression. It's not like we had this snap button somewhere, but I did. I thought, hey, there's a snap button. I've heard people say snap out of it before, so there's got to be a snap button to get out of depression. But anyway, so snap out of it, Angie. Come on. And, within 2 days, she was so bad, she was talking about, I'm crazy, my mind broke. I didn't understand that language either. My mind broke. I do now. Some of you do now, or you do too. But my mind broke. My mind broke, Michael. I don't understand what's going on and why is this happening. My son, Drew, is going to have mom in an insane asylum. We're old enough to be back in that time whenever there were still kind of insane asylums that before they were all closed down. But this wasn't one of those times. It's just what she talked about. I'm going to be in an insane asylum my whole life. And very quickly she tried to kill herself. Very quickly. Took pills. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole story because there's so much to it. But After a year and a half, because she didn't die then, I was able to find her, get her to the hospital. After a year and a half of this going on, just horrible, difficult time of my life and my family's life, because if you're ever around somebody that's depressed, I promise you, it's just as hard. I've had both. It's just as hard as being depressed, if not harder, because you just want to do the right thing. You want to help somebody so badly. My mom was that way. I was that way. It was difficult, such a difficult time. Many, many attempts during this year and a half. We were under the impression, through a series of events, listen, okay, I'm not going to tell you why, but we were under the impression that she was not going to be able to kill herself, that God wasn't going to let her. It was no charismatic thing. It was just something that happened that was very miraculous, and we're like, hey, listen, there's no way God's going to let you. And then my mom called me one day, and I'm going to go back to this chart here for just a second. My mom called me one day and said, Michael, I was reading my Bible this morning. And I said, oh, yeah? Okay. Tell me about it. And she said, well, I was reading in the Psalm, and I don't remember which Psalm it was. I don't know if that I really want to, but there was this Psalm that she was reading, and she said, Michael, God gave me a word today. Man, I shouldn't have done this. This was not fun. But it's such a good illustration. It really is. She said, Michael, God gave me a word today. And I said, what was it, Mom? And she said, Angie's going to be okay. And I said, how did you get that? And, I've been through seminary. I've been through this chart. I've already made this chart. I've already taught through it. And she said, God gave me a word. And I said, well, what was it? She said, this Psalm. And I said, oh, tell me about it. And she read the Psalm to me, and she said, God told me through this, because of what this says, that he wasn't going to let Angie die. And anyway, that was a bad interpretation of Scripture. I said, Mom, don't do that. That's not what that says. And I did say that to her this time. I said, don't do that. It's not what it says. That was speaking to David. And that was a different situation. And there's no timeless principle that says that God's going to do what that says he's going to do. But she was taking the Bible and going straight, applying it directly to our lives. And the reason why it's so sad, and I get like this because my mom got very comforted over it. And at first I was like arguing against her, and I said, Mom, don't do that. And then after a while I was like, golly, this is making her feel a lot better. She actually has been doing better, because my mom was so depressed too. And I mean, she just didn't know what to do with my sister Angie. And I said, okay, good. This is working. It worked. This reading of the Psalm changed her. Okay, who am I to say that God can't directly apply it, even though it doesn't really apply? And so my mom took comfort over it. She really reestablished her relationship with God based upon this one thing. And she was comforted with God and with this situation. And then it wasn't, 4 months later that Angie died, and she was able to take her life. And my mom, she couldn't handle it very well either. And she got incredibly depressed. I mean, so much more depressed. Obviously, you lose your daughter. And she got so incredibly depressed. And then, she had a brain aneurysm. And I'm not saying the depression caused a brain aneurysm. I don't know. But it was really bad. All right. Okay, I think you guys know what I was trying to say. I didn't mean to say it like that. I didn't know. I had no plans of doing this. But anyway, you got to be careful, because you can get a bad understanding of God if you do not take it through this process, and it can hurt you. Okay, let's see. I don't know where to go from here after that because we have taken up all our time. I just maybe I was just going to do today and say, hey, I'm trying to convince you of going through this process, but at the same time, you still don't know the process. I haven't gotten to going through it and illustrating it. I've just illustrated some of the bad ways that we can go through it. So come back next time, and I won't be crying. And I'll take you through the chart. I'll give you more illustrations. I'll give you some very solid illustrations. I think you'll understand it. I think you'll understand the need for the chart, the necessity of it, how important it is, and I just hope to convince you of that. Okay, so anyway, guys, thanks for joining us. I'm not going to keep on apologizing for that. It just happened. But please remember, support me at the Patreon. Come to that. That's a community that we have, a great community. Let me tell you something. You get all kinds of free stuff. And I've taught through how to teach the Bible in a series just by itself. And whenever you come over to the Patreon and subscribe at a certain level, you'll be able to get all the notes, all the PowerPoints, all the videos, all the audios for everything that I've ever done. And that would be one of them, how to study the Bible. That's included. So that's exciting if you want more on this specifically. We're going to spend time on it. We're going to spend a lot of time on it, but we're going to spend time on it only with regard to this particular chart doing the theological process. And then we're going to move on after that. But it's very, very important because if the Bible is the most important source of our theology, we better get it right. We can't just be haphazard. Let me tell you something. The Bible is a dangerous book. It is. It's the greatest book ever written. It is the Word of God. But because of this, it is dangerous in so many ways. And we've got to handle this with great care, understanding what we are carrying. We are carrying the message of God, but also something that can be misused and mislead yourself and mislead so many others. So let's get through this process. Let's understand the theological process, and then we'll move on from there. Thank you guys so much for showing up. And I hope you continue to show up. I hope I've convinced you of the need for just theology in your life and the importance of this, thinking deeply about things and how they affect your life. We will talk to you next time.